Welcome everyone to everyone who's attending this webinar. Thanks for dialing in. I'm really sorry for the delay on behalf of the Fresh Service team. Before we begin, let's do a quick round of check with respect to our mic and visuals. So I think some of you guys have already done it, but why don't you shout me a hello from wherever you're listening this from? I'm just gonna shout out some name. Hey Lucas from Brazil. Hey Wendell from Brazil. Hey Sandro. Where are you from, Sandro? Hey Barry. Hey Charlotte. Oh, that's all right. Amiba. So I'm hoping the mics is working perfectly fine and you're able to hear me. Wow. I'm getting in a lot of names. I'm sorry guys, I'm not able to shout out everyone's name. See someone from Namibia, Brazil, Panama. Hello guys. Okay, let's then move on to some visuals. So just type in a yes if you're able to see what's on Akshay's screen. And no, if you're not able to, you're just staring at a empty screen. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Wendell. Okay, I'm hoping all of you are able to see Akshay's screen. Perfect then. Now, that's really awesome. Welcome again. I'm Praveen from Freshservice, the ITSM product by Freshworks. Hey, but you know what? I'm not going to go and length about myself for Freshservice because I know how eager you guys are to look into Akshay. Just a couple of quick reminders. The webinar will be recorded, so you don't need to worry if you need to pass this to your teammates. Just ask them to register for the webinar, and I'm gonna shoot the recording in 48 hours. Second, do pop in any questions you have. You guys have been kind enough to reach out to me with your questions. But as Akshay is presenting, if you have any questions that you want to ask him, just pop in the chat box, and I'll get it answered by him. And if you folks are active on social media, I just need a small favor. Why don't you just kind of talk about this webinar on your social media profiles on Twitter or LinkedIn? So we'll try to kind of retweet it and probably distribute some gift vouchers at the end of it. So without much delay, up to you, Akshay. All yours.
Great. Thank you to Freshworks and Freshservice for the opportunity to talk to everyone today. My name is Akshay. I'm the product ambassador for ITIL here at Axelos. I'll get down to a more in-depth introduction very shortly. I just want to set people's expectations around the presentation and what you'll be hearing today. I'm going to be talking about the work that we've been doing with the ITIL update. Now, I know many people are very interested in learning about the new certification structure, exactly what's changing from a content perspective, so on and so forth. Due to certain commercial sensitivities around these sorts of topics, unfortunately, I can't talk about them today, but those updates are being scheduled for the next 30 to 60 days. So if I don't do too bad a job here, I'm really hoping that Praveen invites me back in a few months to present back to you folks again, where I can actually give some more clarity around some of these pressing questions. But hopefully what the topics I'll be talking about today will give everybody a sense of what are the problems we're trying to solve with this ITIL update, how we've been going about generating the updated guidance, and how we see it solving the needs of this community. So I really do apologize if I'm not unable to answer your specific question today due to the sort of cone of silence that I'm currently in. But I do promise that the answers will be forthcoming very shortly. And as I said, I hope that Praveen invites me back to present to you guys again.
I think going by the response we are having for this webinar, I think we'll definitely have one more session, Akshay.
Okay, great, good to know. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to be talking about ITIL. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the research program that we've been undertaking. It's an ongoing research program that we have going on. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how exactly we've been going about updating the guidance. So that's me. My name's Akshay. I've been in the service management space for about nearly 20 years now. I'm the ITSM product ambassador here at Axelos, which, as some very clever Dutch gentleman observed, I am Axelos's professional conference attendee. So I tend to travel around the world quite a bit, attending various conferences, presenting over webinars such as this one. Yeah, it's a really fun role. I really do enjoy meeting people out at various conferences, workshops around the world, and understanding the needs and challenges of our community and how they may differ from country to country even. A little bit about me personally. I'm a massive fan of Superman, as well as 70s and 80s heavy metal. So if anyone wants to grab me for a beer at some point and talk about David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar, I'm more than happy to do so. And very infrequently, I'm tweeting as @Blowboy. And if anyone wants to follow me, they're not going to see much, but you know, there's an occasional conversation I have with a few select people on Twitter. So enough about me. Let's talk about some of the challenges that service management is facing today. The first is the emergence of other frameworks and methods. We've got BRMI, IT for IT, DevOps, etc., etc. And our research has suggested that rather than solving, these other frameworks solve very specific problems. And unfortunately, the way that a lot of these frameworks are being adopted means that they are solving problems in sort of a local optimization. They're solving problems for a specific department or for a specific team, whereas what organizations then tend to look for or expect is that these frameworks solve problems at the enterprise scale. For the entire company. And there's a lot of cracks that emerge when people try to scale up methods and frameworks. There is no one silver bullet. A lot of people have been saying that, but unfortunately that message is getting lost. The next one is that many organizations have mistakenly adopted bimodal IT as their organizational construct. I firmly believe bimodal is dangerous. We should really be talking about multimodal IT organizations. It's not just two-speed, it's multi-speed organizations. And last, but certainly not least, is product-centric thinking. Too many organizations, too much digital ink, too much real ink is being spent on talking about how to better develop software products rather than focusing on services and therefore the management of services. So as we know from the V3 construct, products help deliver services, they enable services, or they unlock value through services. But really, organizations are delivering services to their customers. HSBC is delivering a banking service. Uber is delivering a transportation service. Netflix is delivering an entertainment service. They're using products as the primary means of customer engagement, brand reinforcement, and customer support, and so on. So certainly products have a critical part to play, but they are a mechanism for delivering the service. And part of the challenge that service management faces today is that too many people have shifted towards thinking of product-centric organizations, software development as the end-all, be-all and end-all of these organizations. And we need to be able to shift the conversation back to talking about services and managing services. So these challenges are starting to manifest themselves in several anti-patterns, if you will, bad practices that we see out in the industry. And I'm sure some of these practices that I'm about to highlight are not things that are isolated or applicable only to a certain industry or sector. They're fairly widespread and, dare I say, fairly common. The first is watermelon SLAs. I'm not sure how many of you have come across the term watermelon SLAs, but it's where the service provider thinks that they're providing good service, i.e., all the RAG indicators are green, but when they cut into it, everything is red. The customer is actually unhappy. So the service provider thinks that they're doing a good job, but the customers are actually unhappy. And this comes from a misalignment of expectations, measuring and managing against the wrong KPIs and CSFs. It comes down to a lack of understanding or a focus on outputs and metrics related to outputs rather than the outcomes that organizations want to achieve. The next anti-pattern is a sort of almost a join the dots, quote unquote, ITIL implementation, where companies are really looking for a very linear join the dots sort of exercise that will allow them to, as I say, quote unquote, implement ITIL to be able to solve a particular problem. Part of what ITIL has always stressed, and especially with in ITIL Practitioner, which is the latest publication, is that in the management of complex environments, you have to continuously iterate your way to service management success and apply good guiding principles to help you achieve that success. There is no cookie cutter, join the dots type of an approach here. The next is endless maturity improvement initiatives. A lot of times these maturity level improvement initiatives tend to be vanity exercises. Yes, a level 4 maturity is better than a level 3 maturity, but oftentimes what the business actually needs is level 3 being done better rather than level 4. Being more efficient, being more effective, being more sympathetic to customer needs at a lower level of maturity can often be better than trying to achieve a higher level of maturity. And so this drive to achieve a maturity certification or increase a maturity level actually has diminishing returns, and it can end up being money that could be better spent elsewhere. And the last one, I mentioned this before, is the search for that silver bullet, that one bullet that will solve all the organization's problems. Too many frameworks market themselves as such. Too many consultants market these frameworks as such, but really, if you look at the actual literature that's being written amongst many of these frameworks, they all acknowledge their own shortcomings, or they acknowledge where their scope starts and ends. They never present themselves to be the silver bullet, the single framework that will solve all the issues. But yet we find companies are constantly hoping and believing in this mythical silver bullet. So some of the findings from some of the other findings from our research to highlight here, which helped shape our thinking in terms of how we want to pursue this update. ITIL is still widely adopted and used, and it's moved out of infrastructure. So yes, ITIL may have started out in infrastructure management and service desk traditionally, but we've seen ITIL being used in software development, in the management of portfolios. We've seen ITIL guidance helping large managed service providers create cost models and accounting models to measure the rate of return on their service management investments. We're seeing a lot of the ITIL governance around interfacing with governance and risk management systems being adopted. So it is moving out of infrastructure. We still have a lot of work to do there, but the good news is that ITIL is moving out of infrastructure, or has moved out of infrastructure. Certifications are still highly valued, both by companies and professionals. The certifications demonstrate that professionals, as well as the organization, speak the common language of IT. They speak the lingua franca, if you will, of IT, or of IT service management. And so certifications are valued by both organizations and professionals, and that's not changing for the foreseeable future. And the last, and I would say the finding that tremendously excited me during the research program is that we had an overwhelming response from the community of practitioners that we reached out to at various conferences and workshops and interviews. And the community wants to contribute. They want to be involved in ITIL. A lot of the community's members' careers were built on ITIL, be that as a practitioner, a consultant, a trainer, and so on. And so they wanted to be able to give back to the community. They wanted to repay the investment that had contributed to their success. And this was very heartening to see. But in order to capitalize on all that goodwill, we've got to solve certain challenges to ensure ITIL's continued success and longevity. So there are a few challenges that I'd like to highlight here. The first is that we heard time and again that the guidance was too vast. the current ITIL book library, if you will, is about, I want to say about 2,000 pages. And so a lot of people would say to us that, look, I just don't know where to start. I'm trying to solve a problem. How do I know whether I should look in strategy or in design or transition or operate or CSI or practitioner? So the guidance itself is too vast the way it's currently published. The lessons of adopt and adapt and continually improve need to be constantly reinforced. We talk about this during the training, but it seems that when the moment people leave training, the moment they walk back through the doors of their company, those lessons go out the window. And we need to constantly reinforce, with the update, we need to constantly reinforce the tenets of adopt, adapt, as well as continually improve. There is no silver bullet. There is no one size fits all. You need to be able to take the guidance and tweak it to fit your specific context, and then continually improve after that. And the last one is that the learning from the guidance, from the training, from reading the books, this learning needs to be quickly understood, easily accessible, and immediately applicable. So one of the things that people talked about very positively about ITIL Practitioner, which was published back in 2016, is that the language of the book was definitely far more, quote unquote, human readable than other books. The content was very practical. So it could be quickly understood. It could be quickly applied because we had included things like templates in the book. And so people want to see more of that. And we definitely want to be able to provide more of that in the updated guidance. So once we identified these challenges and opportunities and threats and so on, we assembled the lead architect team, or LAC. Margot Leach is our chief product officer here at Axelos, and I work alongside Roman, who is actually the person in charge of delivering the update. I'm sort of the ambassador, going around the world and talking to various people and doing bits and pieces of research, and he's responsible for pulling everything together and actually delivering the updated guidance. Jose is the head of product. He reports to Margot. I actually report up to Jose in my role as product ambassador. But the extended architecture team was selected both for their breadth of knowledge of the service management space domain, but also to represent a diversity of role within service management. We have consultants, we have trainers, we have practitioners, but also to bring in a global perspective. We have people from Japan, from Mexico, from the Netherlands, Canada, US, UK, rounding it off. I myself have worked in both the US and the UK predominantly, not really worked in India, even though I went to university there. So we tried to choose people for the architecture team who could provide us with that well-rounded experience, as well as experience from around the world. And that's the architecture team. If you know them personally, then you know the wealth of knowledge that they bring to the table. These folks are also quite active on the conference circuit, and if you do happen to meet them at a conference, I would highly encourage people to go up to them and introduce yourself and say hello and ask them about the ITIL update. And so in our first architecture team meeting, we listed out 6 design principles that we would follow for this ITIL update program. Now, the design principles have no relation to the 9 guiding principles. They are the things that we always kept at the back of our mind when considering what we wanted to write about and how we wanted to write about things. So the first design principle is we wanted to make the updated guidance modular. Making it modular would allow us to update smaller sections faster. So for example, incident management or change management is evolving at quite a fast rate, whereas something like service portfolio management perhaps isn't evolving quite as fast. And so we recognize that we might have to update any guidance we provide around incident or change management at a greater frequency than we would other topics. So we wanted to make the update modular. We wanted to make it lean, which was to say we trim out the unnecessary fat. We eliminate unnecessary content in core guidance. There is a place for extended guidance, but it might not necessarily have to be the book that everyone buys as part of an exam prep, for example. It needed to be practical. I'd mentioned on a prior slide about how ITIL practitioner was very well received for the practical nature of the guidance and the advice and the templates that it provided as part of the core guidance, and we wanted to extend that across the entire ITIL guidance portfolio, so that as much as we could, regardless of what level, what the scope of the guidance might be, we were always providing examples, templates, and practical advice rather than something that was abstract or theory. We wanted the guidance to be evolutionary, which is to say that we were not going to introduce change for change's sake, just to be able to say, hey, we're now different. If there are concepts that could be retained and brought forward, we wanted to do so. This would allow us to ensure backward compatibility with prior certifications, with backward compatibility with prior organizational investment in learning, in certifications, in organizational design, in tooling, and so on. So we didn't want to change what could be preserved. We wanted the update to be developed collaboratively, and I've got a slide coming up shortly which talks about how we've collaborated with the community of professionals and how we're constantly looking for more people to join us on this journey as well. So we wanted this guidance to be co-developed with IT service management professionals. We didn't want this to become an exercise where we locked the architecture team in a basement room with a whiteboard and said, work it out, and let them come out of the room only when the whole thing had been written. And the last is we wanted to make sure that the guidance could be as flexible as it could, which is to say that we could, by making it flexible, we could write about how certain emerging ways of working or new ways of working or new ways of management, emerging frameworks that are getting their start now, we could explore how they interacted with established best practices. And we could write about both best practice as well as emerging practice in the same breath, or on the same page, sorry, mixed metaphor. So I mentioned I have some stats around the community involvement. So obviously we had the lead architect team, there are 10 people there. But then we also had a slightly wider pool of people who had signed NDAs with us, who were on board to either advise us, review some of the models and things we were writing about. They reviewed the actual content and provided their feedback. And beyond that, we had an even wider community pool. These are people who wanted to stay in touch, be part of the conversation, take part in surveys and polls, but who didn't necessarily want to sign an NDA and become more involved and spend more time engaged with advising or reviewing or writing content. So as of about, I think the stats I have right now are about 30 days old. But in the wider community group, we have, I think, just north of 1,900 people. And in the SME pool, we have somewhere around 160 to 165 people in that group as well. The SME pool, I have to say, is very, very active. Out of the 1,900 people in the community pool, with our forums and so on, there's probably people who are more active than others, to be quite frank. But when we do send out things like surveys and polls, we do actually get quite a high degree of involvement, which is very encouraging to me. And so we've been able to capture thoughts from the community of professionals, as well as ask them difficult questions and get answers that can then be plugged back into our architecture discussions and workshops as well. So I mentioned the 6 guiding principles. We actually thought we would talk about how we've applied our own 9 guiding principles from ITIL Practitioner. For those of you who don't know it, these are the 9 guiding principles. And we've tried to keep these 9 guiding principles firmly in mind as through the entire program, not just about writing content, but even when working with the exams team or working with marketing or partner account management or the membership team and so on. I'm not going to go through this in every single point, but for example, focus on value. Well, for us, the value is for the end customers. It's for people like you. It's people who are using the guidance, and we need to focus on value for you guys. And so that's why we are trying to make this as backwardly compatible. But we also want to be able to write guidance about emerging frameworks. We want to be able to provide practical tools and techniques and advice. We want to think and work holistically. We want to be able to think about how the entire ecosystem and supply chains within the ecosystem work. So we're keeping in mind how ATOs behave, how learning and development teams within your organizations, what they think about when it comes to selecting training for their teams, and how they choose which training will offer the best value, and so that we can develop material that provides the best value. Of course, we've observed directly. We've conducted a number of research workshops and seminars and surveys where we can talk directly with end customers to understand your pain points, your challenges, so that we can bring that back into our discussions. So we've tried to apply all 9 of these guiding principles to the work that we've been doing, and I have to say it's been quite successful to keep these 9 in mind as we progress through this update. So a few things that I'd like to talk about now. We want to be able to link business needs with guidance. It's no longer about IT teams. We want to be able to provide this wider context. Because what we heard time and again through our research program is that the fundamentals of good service management are as important today as ever. Digital transformation, pressures on IT to provide more value, and other challenges, cost challenges, for example, that IT organizations face. The fundamental concepts of IT service management are helping companies address all these challenges. So the fundamentals are still good, but so that's why the guidance needs to cover these fundamental concepts, accepted terminology. ITIL is the de facto language, common language across service management from organization to organization, from industry to industry. And so we need to make sure that we continue to provide guidance on these fundamental concepts and as well as terminology. But we also need to show IT workers, staff members, where they fit in to the wider organizational system or the service management system. They need to understand through the guidance that we write how the work that they do delivers value back into the organization or for the customer. So rather than just talking about your work in isolation, part of what we want to be able to do with the guidance is to help people understand what the bigger picture looks like and why their work is important in the context of the bigger picture. Touch upon the point of adapting and adopting. As I mentioned before, a lot of people forget about this. It is critical, but at the same time, it's very contextual. And what works for a specific organization might not work for another organization. And so we're architecting this update so that we can write about we can provide a flexible reference architecture, if you will, to show the common threads from company to company or team to team or industry to industry. But alongside that, we want to supplement that with very explicit guidance about how ITIL can be adapted to work in those different contexts, whether that's the context of different teams, whether that's a context of one company to another, or that's the context is how it works in the banking industry versus the pharma industry, as an example. And the last point that we wanted to focus on with the update is that culture cannot be ignored. Oftentimes, culture and mindsets and entrenched ways of working is often the biggest barrier to success of IT service management programs or of IT service management work. And so what we want to be able to do with this update and the guidance we're writing in the update is to help practitioners identify and encourage good behaviors that unlocks value for the organization, for the customer, for the ecosystem in general. So we're trying to bring in more of that human element into the guidance as well. And now, you may have caught this announcement a short while ago, but when we thought about where we are in terms of the evolution of IT or the evolution of our industry, we can see a clear pattern of how industrialization leads to commoditization, and commoditization then leads to the emergence of new and interesting technologies. And so if you cast your mind back to the first industrial revolution, which was really the mechanization of very manual back-breaking labor, that then led to commoditization upon which newer technology, commoditization of things like steel, upon which newer technologies like steam engines, automotive vehicles, and so on could be developed. And once those became commodities, we had the third industrial revolution, which was things like smartphones, emails, the mass communication. We had things like the cassette player. For those of you who don't recognize it, that image in the top right is a audio cassette, which was used back in the 80s. Not being facetious, a lot of people don't know what that is. So we had the third industrial revolution, which is still going on. We're still seeing a disruption in the way companies do work, the replacement of a lot of paper-based record keeping or paper-based interaction between customers and companies replaced by digital means, digitization as well as digitalization of work. And we're already seeing the emergence of the fourth industrial revolution, which is all about AI, high-speed communication, nanotechnologies, blockchain, Bitcoin, so on and so forth. And so service management for the modern world is now going to be called, the new update is going to be called ITIL 4. So let me take the time then to identify and address some of the top concerns we heard from various organizations around the world. The first is, will ITIL allow my organization to be more agile, better at DevOps, more cost effective, more responsive to the needs of the customer? The answer is yes. Will ITIL allow me to provide better or increased value, better return on value for my IT investments, for less cost and risk? We believe the answer is yes. And lastly, will the update invalidate my prior investment in training, tooling, organizational design? Will all of that stuff still be relevant? And the answer is yes, it will still be relevant. We are ensuring backward compatibility whilst pointing the way forward. At the same time, in our research, we also identified top individual concerns. So will ITIL continue to help me progress in my career? Will my current certifications remain valid? And will I be able to stay on top of all the changes happening in my industry or in my domain? And we believe that the answer is yes, because we're structuring and architecting the update to allow us to continuously push out updates that will help people stay on top of their changes in their industry, thereby progressing their careers. And let me be absolutely clear right now, we are not invalidating anyone's certifications. Your certifications will still be valid. And with that, I think Praveen wanted to say a couple of words as well to close things off.
Thank you, Akshay. Yeah, I think that was a great presentation with a lot of questions that have lined up. So I think we're far from being done. But before we move on to the question and answers, I wanted to have a quick word about Freshservice. So Freshservice is an ITIL compliant ITSM tool that helps you go about your everyday IT tasks with breeze. The thing with Freshservice is we put our user experience and ease of use at the forefront of our innovation. And you know what? It comes with a suite of features around ITIL modules, asset management, automations, among others. So I'm not gonna go inlands about Freshservice. What I'm gonna do is, if any of you are interested in knowing more about Freshservice, I'll give you my LinkedIn ID. So do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll help you put in this thing with the right person. So just a second. So that's my LinkedIn. So in case you want to know more about Freshservice or anything about this webinar, I'll be reachable over there. And in case you want to reach out to me over mail, that's my email ID. And also, exactly around 15 days from now, myself along with my colleague Sanjeev are going to be talking about why people aren't using your service desk software. While a part of it is because of the lack of awareness in internal marketing, a part of it is also about the psychology of end users. So there's something about the attitude of end users that's stopping them from using the service desk, right? So my talk will focus on combining some marketing techniques that help you overcome the psychological barriers of end users. So I'll just quickly pop in a poll. In case you want to be notified about this webinar or this discussion, just pop in a yes, and I'll send you guys the hacks. So I'll run it for a quick 20 seconds. So I hope you guys are able to see the. So I'll just give it 10, 15 more seconds before we close this. So I'll be talking about, very, very simple psychological barriers that end users are, that's stopping them from using. Awesome. I'm gonna end the poll. Thank you everyone who had voted for this. And along with the follow-up mail for the recording for the webinar, I'll send you guys a link for that webinar as well. So now let's move on to the Q&A. We've got a lot of them. One second before I start popping up. Yeah. So John Andrews asks, Akshay, saying, hey, I'm just starting out with ITIL and I haven't done the foundation course yet. Would you advise me to wait until the new guidance is published?
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question back, and I appreciate this platform might not be conducive for a two-way dialogue here. But my question back would be, what problem are you trying to solve with this training? Are you trying to get a leg up at your workplace? Do you think it would be good from a short-term, in the short term to help you identify and apply for new positions? Is it something that you think will help you solve challenges in your organization today? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then I would say yes, do the certification now. Your certifications will not be invalidated. You will get some good knowledge that will help you in your job or finding a new job or whatever the case may be. So if you're just casting about for, hey, how can I spend my training dollars this year? Again, depending on your need, you may still feel that ITIL is a good certification to take. Certainly, as I said, it provides a common language and terminology across industries, across IT organizations. So there may be some long-term benefit to still taking it. But if you have an immediate pressing challenge that you want to solve, and ITIL guidance and certification helps you solve it, don't wait.
Okay, perfect. So second question comes from Steve Leach, who asks, hey, you know what? I've been an ITIL expert for years and recently became a Verisum evangelist. Some people see this as a conflict, but I don't, because these two approaches complement each other. Do you agree?
I welcome Verisum's presence because it's helping generate a lot of good conversation about what service management means in the digital economy. Certainly, I think some of the content that's been provided and presented thus far has been very interesting and useful to read.
Perfect.
I haven't
So
done the certification myself, so I can't comment on the actual certification process, but I think that the conversations that Verisym has started and some of the things that they're talking about are very good things to be talking about right now.
perfect. I think a lot of people have been asking about whether the recording will be shared. Guys, yes, the recording will be shared at the end of it. So Andy has been asking that has the practitioner guidance and certification met expectations? What is the global pass rate? And are there plans to recalibrate the exam to make the certification more obtainable?
So unfortunately, that's not something I can talk about at any great depth or expertise. That is something I can take up with my exams team, and they can certainly get that information back to you.
Okay.
From a point of view of the research we did with subject matter experts, I can tell you that ITIL practitioners' content and the guidance, which is something that I focus on, the guidance was very highly regarded. People loved the guidance. They wanted to see more guidance like that.
Okay, perfect. And then Michael asks, is there anything new in ITIL to address enterprise service management and how to use ITIL in that environment?
So that's a very interesting question. So I just wanted to, a little disclaimer, what I'm about to respond with is my personal opinion. It's not Axelos's official opinion or official position. My perspective is that enterprise service management, or the conversations around enterprise service management, has tended to be tool driven. ServiceNow certainly kickstarted the conversation or restarted the conversation a few years ago when they started talking about HR as a service or marketing as a service, and they were showing how their platform could enable the enterprise function as a service concept. And therefore, a lot of the literature I've seen around enterprise service management tends to be very tools focused or tools enablement focused, rather than saying, does the enterprise need to manage its internal functions as service? Again, my personal opinion, I believe that enterprise service management has some legs. I don't think that the business side of an organization, or rather, I should say the non-IT side of an organization, I think, no, let me take a step back. I think some parts of non-IT teams, some of them are mature enough to think about their work as a service. Some of them aren't there yet. Even the people who are able to think of their work in terms of services perhaps don't recognize what they feel is the non-business language of service management thus far. If you go to a business person and talk to them about an incident or a problem, they'll be very confused, for example. But they would recognize things like portfolio management. So there are some bridges that need to be built. There are some bridges that are already there, but there's a lot of bridges that still need to be built. So I think enterprise service management is a good concept. Hopefully the industry sustains some momentum around them. And if it does, I think we'll see it come about in a fairly big way in the next 3 to 5 years. But I don't think we're there yet.
Perfect. And we have Sanjeev asking, do you think ITSM tools and softwares also need to evolve to align with the new ITIL update?
That's a really good question. We've begun conversations with a number of software tool vendors to try to address that very same question. I think in some cases they do. And the specific cases I'm thinking about is where tools tend to constrain service management work to following a very prescriptive, granular process and not allowing for human intelligence or intervention at the appropriate places. We see this time and again, for example, in service desks where you have to categorize every single call that's coming in before it can be escalated. But what happens if there is no clean categorization available? You want to be able to introduce some level of human intelligence into the system, because at the end of the day, you're trying to resolve a customer's issue. You're not trying to be perfect in terms of record keeping at that moment in time. So I think tool vendors perhaps need to take a look at how they can help organizations loosen up their procedures while still retaining a level of granularity that aids reporting and management and governance. But at the same time, I think it's also, I think the tools or the platforms themselves have the flexibility. I think it's the approach that a lot of people tend to take of using out-of-the-box implementations or bringing consultants in who are going to be very prescriptive because the organizations think they need to be very prescriptive, very rigid. And I think that as a community of practitioners, we need to be able to step back and say, hey, hang on, we need to start thinking about service management in a different way and using the power of the tools and the platforms that we already have to reflect the flexibility and agility that we want to introduce.
Perfect.
Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer. If that's not clear enough, I'm more than happy to try another way.
Okay, perfect. Andrew Johnson asks, when is the new guidance expected to be published?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to raise my hand and say this is one of the things I can't talk about. As I said at the beginning of the call, there are certain things that I can't really share at this time, things like timelines, roadmaps, etc., etc. Okay. Those details will be forthcoming. I just can't talk about them right now.
Perfect. Axel asks, similar to a question from John, I'm currently halfway on my path to ITIL expert. What do you recommend and how to continue?
Okay, so the short answer is continue your way to expert. Even with ITIL 4 coming in, if you were around during the V2 to V3 transition, you will know that there was an extended period of time before current certificates and training courses were retired. So I would encourage Axel to continue along his path to expert. If possible, get to expert before anything gets retired or replaced, I should say, not retired. Get to expert before things get replaced or scopes change or training courses change and so on. Okay. Keep going.
Perfect. So I think for a change, we have a question from Michael on a perspective from the instructor side. He asks, is there any guide for instructors to update themselves on different courses?
Sure. All these sort of sales enablement and training enablement materials will be made available as soon as we're able to release them. There is definitely a very robust and solid plan in place in terms of releasing materials to trainers, recertifying trainers, doing train-the-trainer sessions, and so on. All those details will be made available through the normal partner channels that we have available. If you are affiliated with one of the ATOs who partner with us, then you should be receiving those updates. If not, I would ask Michael to perhaps reach out to me or reach out to you, Praveen, and you can forward his information on to me, and I can put him in touch with the relevant people.
Perfect. And Nasir, so I think we'll go for questions for around 5 more minutes. For five more minutes, we'll go for questions. So Nasir asks, how will ITIL V4 compare to Corbett 5? Because I see a lot of similarities between both these frameworks.
I'm going to have to raise my hand and say I'm not really that familiar with Corbett 5. My colleague Roman is. He used to be a trainer himself and has delivered many Corbett courses. We did look at a lot of Corbett literature, and the fact that Corbett had previously aligned with, is currently aligned with ITIL V3. We wanted to continue that sense of alignment. So we are working with members of ISATA. We are working with people who are experts in Corbett. Really, ITIL 4, as I mentioned during the webinar, is about giving a sort of a very holistic, a wider view of organizational activities or IT work or IT service management work, and how everything fits together to deliver value to the customer, to the organization, and so on. So there will be some overlaps. What we try to do in developing the guidance is, where necessary, point out to other frameworks that offer specialized advice in very niche topics. And so ITIL, we're not trying to represent ITIL as the silver bullet, of course. We're trying to say, look, if you want more details about high velocity software development, go read the DevOps handbook. Or here's ISO's standard for software development. If you want to know more about multi-vendor supplier management, here's a couple of places where you can go read about that, and so on. So there are references to COBIT. We are working with ISACA. We are working with a lot of consultants and trainers who are very knowledgeable about COBIT as well. If you need more specific details on that, please do get in touch with me and I'll try to get the answers to you.
Perfect. So Timothy asks, we are in the process of implementing a new ITSM tool. Should we wait for ITIL 4 or should we just go along? How can we ensure that the tool we select will be compliant to ITIL 4?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. The first is you're trying to solve an immediate problem. That problem's not going to go away anytime soon. So from that perspective, you shouldn't stop. In terms of compliance with ITIL 4, ITIL version 3, version 4, remove the versions. ITIL has always been a framework which needs to be adapted to a specific context, and it needed to be continually improved. So as long as you're aware that what you're doing is adapting out of the box workflows to meet your business needs, and after that initial implementation, you are maintaining like a CSI register, you're maintaining a continual improvement register, you're constantly going back and asking yourselves, how can we improve the way we're doing this? How can we improve this workflow to be more efficient, to be faster, to provide a better customer experience? As long as you keep adapt and adopt and continually improve at the forefront of everything you're doing with this tool implementation, and those don't stop at the end of the tool implementation, they are yours to carry for life. It's kind of like having a child, right? Or a pet. So as long as you keep adapt and adopt and continue to improve at the forefront of your mind with this tool adoption program, you'll be okay.
Perfect. So Mark O'Neill asks, we are an accredited training provider with Axelos. So when will the new course syllabus be ready for us to start creating the new updated courseware? How much development time will be required?
So all of that information, if you're already part of a global ATO and you're already connected to us, that information will be reaching you very shortly through all the official channels from the partner account management team. So just keep your eyes open for those announcements. They will be, there's a regular communication program that's scheduled to start, I think, the middle or end of August. In the next 4 to 6 weeks, basically.
Perfect. Last couple of questions before we wrap this up. So there's a lot of questions around, DevOps and this thing. So Walmir asks, are you going to consider DevOps best practices and include them into the new ITIL 4?
I would suggest that DevOps is an emerging practice. There is no best practice on how DevOps needs to be done. There are many, many different practices which are still evolving that fit a particular context or a particular business need, not only on the development side, but even on the operational side, or even in the biz, sec, dev, QA, ops, whatever your acronym of choice might be. But yes, DevOps as a movement, as a philosophy is very important. We're not going to ignore it. We're going to be providing pointers to it. We're going to be developing a lot of supplementary material that talk about how ITIL it can align with the needs of the DevOps philosophy. Or to put it another way, how you can adapt ITIL guidance to fit the needs of a fast flow, fast feedback, continually improving development and technical operations team, or even the wider value stream itself. So we're definitely not going to ignore it. I just wouldn't call DevOps best practice at this point in time.
Perfect.
It's a very powerful movement, but it's not a best practice. Sorry.
Perfect. I think last 3 questions, Akshay, before we just wrap this. So, so Andy asks, is there something like a bridge course for ITIL 2011 experts to ITIL 4?
All details about the certification scheme transition mapping from current certification names to whatever the new, if there are going to be new certification names. All of that stuff, unfortunately, is still being discussed. I can't really say anything one way or another right now. But as I said, communications to the general public is going to start in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I know that is one of the things that is at the forefront of everybody's mind. And I'm fairly sure that that answer will be made public very, very quickly once the communication plan starts.
Perfect. So Andrew,
I don't have answers now.
Oh, okay. So Andrew Johnson asks, you spoke of the update to be designed on modularly. Are updates to the ITIL expected regularly, or is it going to be like release once and wait till the next update?
So at my level, we are concentrating on just getting this one update out. What we envision behind that is a continuous stream, if you will, of micro updates to refine particular points or particular chapters or particular sections. It's not going to be big bang updates from here on out. It's going to be small updates to specific sections on an as needed basis. Apart from that, there's also going to be a steady, constant pipeline of content that we want to publish. Either in conjunction with companies like Freshservice or under the Axelos banner, which gives practitioners practical advice on how to adapt and adopt and improve their service management practices.
Perfect. I think we'll be picking the last question for the day, and let me see who we can ask this from. Okay, perfect. So I got the question. One second. So Norbert asks, you mentioned different cultures work together. So could you explain it in more detail, please?
Sure. Somebody mentioned DevOps just now. Now, a lot of enterprises who perhaps don't have a single team doing both development and technical operations. It's a very typical scenario. Developers are incentivized. They have the culture of providing software updates fast with the appropriate amount of rigor. But software development is messy, it's complex, things tend to break, but it's accepted risk-taking. Whereas operations, service operations or technical operations is being incentivized, and the culture is built around providing a support experience of not breaking things. And when things break, of restoring things quickly, of managing customer experience or managing customer expectation. Even there, we have the conflict that has given rise to the DevOps movement. And a lot of organizations haven't adopted DevOps. They're looking at it, they might be interested in it, but they still have silos between Dev and Ops. Similarly, we have, let's say, project managers who are focused on outputs of projects. We have service management professionals who are focused on, for example, meticulous record keeping, or they're focused on customer experience, or rather than following a project plan to the nth degree. So again, there you're setting up for a conflict of culture. But what we should be trying to do is not trying to homogenize culture across the organization, because different teams have to work in different ways to accomplish their objectives. We have to embrace that. We have to lean into that. We have to understand what type of culture is appropriate where, and how we can build the appropriate scaffolding, how we can build the appropriate bridges to allow teams to be able to collaborate despite having different cultures. Am I still on? Praveen, are you still there? Things went dead all of a sudden.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Sorry. Looks like my phone blacked out for a second. Did you get all of that?
Yeah, I got all of it. No, so I just wanted to kind of thank everyone who, kind of joined us from all over the world. And thank you, Akshay, for taking time out from your schedule to, kind of talk about the new ITIL update. I hope it was of great use to everyone and you got the information that you guys were looking for. So I promise to everyone that, we'll be collaborating with Akshay once more, once the new update is out, to, kind of answer all your questions around the update. And yeah, Akshay, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say, I mentioned before about my role as product ambassador. I get to travel around the world. So if I occasionally pop onto LinkedIn and tell people about where I'm going to be. So most in the short term, I'm going to be I'm going to have a lightning trip around India, Bangalore, Pune, and Delhi to support some roadshows that we're doing there. After which I'll be in Sydney, Canberra, and Melbourne to support ITSMF Australia. So if you're based in any of those cities and you'd be interested in meeting up for a coffee or a drink, please do get in touch. I'll do my best to accommodate you in between all the meetings and presentations that I have to give. But as I said, I love to meet with people from around the world and talk to them about their work and their challenges and their successes. After Australia, I'm probably going to be in DC for the Global Safe Summit, and then at Service Management World in Orlando. So again, if you're at any of these cities, please do reach out to me, and I would love to meet if our schedules and the stars align.
Perfect.
So please get in touch.
Yep. So on behalf of the Freshservice team, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you in a more informative session sometime around. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Freshservice for giving me this opportunity as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.